Hello there, everyone, and welcome to GamePoints episode 307, your weekly get together where we talk about recent gaming news. I'm, as always, your host, Stephen Brown, and joining me today again is
I'm David.
David. It's been a
And I
while.
do
Good
exist.
to have you back. Yes, you do exist. Tonight, David, Ubisoft might be courting some buyers for their company. 2K seems to be revving up their own version of Rocket League, and Activision Blizzard loses millions of players over the past year. So we have all kinds of fun business stories to get into. But first, I want everyone here to know that this is an audience interactive podcast. So if you're watching live here at Twitch TV/GamePoints, we stream every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. But you can also watch old shows later over at YouTube, Rebel, BitChute, all the other media platforms that I can throw this thing on. Stuffy Twitchy says, welcome back, David. So thank you very much for welcoming back. David, how have you been? How's the past few weeks been? We haven't seen you in a
while. Busy. I am suffering the demise that is being a real-life adult.
Yes. Just life has a habit of getting in the way sometimes. Your presence on the show probably will be diminished over the next while.
Yeah, I will try and make it as much as I can, but yeah, you might be missing me a bit more often, unfortunately. But I'm still here in spirit. I still like video games.
It is what it is, and you have put in the work. You have definitely put in at least 300 plus so episodes on this show. I can't argue with your commitment to that. So, thank you very much for doing what you even could. That's not to say that you won't ever not be back, but it could probably be me solo for more of these shows than not from this point going forward.
Well, we'll see.
I still want to drag you back in for things like the E3 show, perhaps, and the predictions.
There's special stuff where I'll try and work it out, or I'll try even harder to work it out. How's that?
But yeah, just want to mention that. Though, however, I do have to ask what you have been playing over the past few weeks.
I'm still playing Elden Ring, which is funny because I know that you already finished it, but
I lapped you.
As much as real life got in the way of me showing up on the show, it's also interrupted video game time.
Yeah, it's weird how that happens.
I know, it's some shenanigans. So I don't know, I play Vampire Survivor sometimes. Oh, you know what I did do, friend? Actually, I don't think I even talked about this on the show because I think it happened in one of those many weeks while I was away. Guess what I have in my house?
Did you finally get a PS5?
I finally got a PS5.
It was either that or you got your video card that you've been looking for like a year now. And the more likely of those two is the PS5.
Yep, I spent my video card money on a PlayStation.
All right. Yeah,
and then I got Gran Turismo, and then they promptly broke that game, and I'm super sad about it.
Yeah, I'm hearing all kinds of nasty shit about Gran Turismo and how it's really some of the most avaricious shit that you've ever seen Sony put out.
Yeah, but in spite of me being angry at that game, I have also been having some fun with Ghostwire Tokyo.
How is that? I haven't even had a chance to play that yet.
I like it. It's like, I mean, obviously it takes place in Japan, so it's very Japanese, but when I say that, I mean, think it's like Yakuza-y Japanese. Not in tone, but in flavor, in that it's just, you're absolutely in Japan, and there's like some references that are lost on me, and there's like some cool stuff going on, and I don't know. It's interesting though. I'm liking it so far. I don't actually know. I know a bit about what's happening, but I feel like there's some places for the story to go that could be exciting. So I'm optimistic.
I hear that it's very unapologetic in how steeped in Japanese culture it is.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. There's some stuff that is just totally lost on me. Yeah, but I'm kind of with it, if that makes sense. Like it knows what it wanted to be.
Yeah, I keep hearing all these great things about it, which is a shame that Sony kind of sent this off to die. Because there was no marketing.
Very quiet release, not a whole lot of marketing. Like it really feels like they, I don't know, didn't want to do a lot with this game.
It's almost like when your main competitor buys out the studio that made something that's a PlayStation, a console exclusive, you might not want to really be tooting its horn too much.
That's fair.
Stuff at Twitch in chat says, life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans. A quote from John Lennon. That's
Flash Michael Scott.
Very, very accurate. I've fallen back on the Destiny train myself.
You got back into Destiny too?
Yeah, I finally picked up the Witch Queen expansion. I know I'm like late to the party on this one. I'm not like religiously playing it like I was 6 months ago, But I'll pop on for an hour or so, knock out some stuff, and then flop back off. I'm really enjoying my time with that. And of course, with Stellaris announcing its recent expansion coming out in a couple weeks, I've fallen back into that game hard too. In fact,
Perfect.
I've streamed it for like 2 weeks straight.
Excellent. As you should.
Yeah, that game's great. The game's still great. I'm really looking forward to the Overload expansion. Anyways, enough babbling about what we've been doing. Let's go ahead and get right into the news here with this first story via Bloomberg. And of course, all links to our stories are provided either down below if you're watching in the description, or if you're watching in the description if you're watching this on YouTube, or later over on our Discord server. You can take a look at all these links there. Headline: Assassin's Creed video game publisher Ubisoft draws buyout interest. The story. Ubisoft Entertainment, the video game publisher behind Assassin's Creed franchise, is attracting preliminary takeover interest from buyout funds, people with knowledge of the matter said. Several private equity firms, including Blackstone and KKR, have been studying the French business, and according to people who asked not to be identified because the information is private. Ubisoft hasn't entered into any serious negotiations with potential acquirers. It is unclear whether its major shareholder is willing to pursue a deal, the people said. The family of the Ubisoft chairman Yves Guillemot, the company's biggest investor with a 15% stake, data supplied by the Bloomberg showed. Shares of Ubisoft have fallen around 41% Paris trading over the past year, making the market value about 4.8 billion euros. The deliberations are at an early stage, and there's no certainty if any of the suitors will proceed with offers, the people said. Representatives of Blackstone and KKR declined comment. Ubisoft said in an emailed statement it's built a strong portfolio and is ideally positioned to capitalize on emergency opportunities amid rapid growth in the industry. The company declined to comment on any takeover interest. By the way, that last bit there, David, is a good acknowledgement that they are looking to be bought out.
Yeah, which is interesting because we've reported, we've been doing this for a long time, and we've reported on the idea of Ubisoft being sold or purchased or hostile takeovered several times. And it's always kind of gotten kind of close where we think maybe it's going to, and then it backs off.
Right. There was, I think back in 2018 when Vivendi was really trying to take over Ubisoft in a hostile takeover. The Guillemot family was able to retain control of the company, I believe, with an investment from Tencent.
I think that's the way it shook out, yes. So it's interesting because it's not surprising. I feel like they've been wanting to get rid of the thing or cautiously open to it for a long time. So I don't know. It feels like something that we talked about a few years ago, and maybe this gets further than the last one did, and maybe it goes all the way, but we don't really know.
This feels like it has Sony written all over it. I have heard so many backstage grumblings that Sony.
Well, we know that Sony's looking to buy something.
And there have been nonstop rumors over the past 2 weeks that they are in the process of either finalizing or have already done it and are going to announce soon that they've acquired someone major.
And if you're going to acquire a company, you might as well acquire a company with like a shady history and a bunch of troubled characters working there. And since Blizzard has already been gobbled up, here's your next best bet.
The value of Ubisoft.
By Ubisoft.
Ubisoft's value comes not necessarily from its staff, but from its IP.
Yeah. Hey, you want to print a check? We've got Assassin's Creed and Far Cry and, some things. All the Rainbow games.
Yeah, the Tom Clancy catalog, Division, all that good stuff. But yeah, I think this is also one of those reasons why. I know Ubisoft said they're delaying a lot of things to work on quality issues and how they really don't have much coming up anytime soon at the moment. The new Ghost Recon, for example, got pushed back. I think it's because they're trying to get all their ducks in a row to sell. Because you don't want to sell while something's currently in development, potentially, so that we have like a nice clean break.
That's
what this strikes me as.
You could say that, but that's literally just what happened to Activision Blizzard.
Well, we'll be getting to them later in the show, too. What do you think, David? Who do you think would be the most logical sense for these people to buy? I'll go ahead and say my guess is still Sony, just based not so much on any relationship they might have between each other, but because of just the rumors I keep hearing behind the scenes that Sony has or is about to announce they acquired someone big. So it very well could be them.
Since you picked what I would believe to be the leading horse in the race, I'll be the pessimist and say it'll be either China or Saudi Arabia.
I don't think the Saudi Arabia fund would have any, the Crown Prince fund, whatever the hell it's called, would have any thing into this. But I wouldn't be surprised.
They got SNK money, but they don't got Ubisoft money.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Tencent did drop a dime on it to pick it up, because it's just, they already own part of it.
Yep, they got a piece,
much more.
And they really, really, really want a bigger chunk of the American market.
Right.
Because, you know, we spend a lot of money on video games.
This is what this year is going to be. We've talked about this before multiple times, that this is the year of the acquisition. One of my predictions was I had like 10 indie studios that would be gobbled up. I don't think any of them have been yet, but many indie studios have been swallowed up. This doesn't surprise me at all. And I get the feeling that we will know one way or another on this within the next 2 months. Because they will.
I'm going to go with, regardless of who purchases Ubisoft, I'm going to think it's shitty. Because I don't think consolidation breeds creativity.
As a general rule, you're right.
That being said, Ubisoft is already not super creative, so I guess what's the worst that can happen?
That is one of those things you have to take a look at. For example, if you're already disgusted with Ubisoft as far as this creativity side things, because they keep cranking out the same thing over and over and again, if a company is already floundering, would it not make sense to have new blood take it over and try to revitalize what was once a bright and shining studio?
Yeah, that makes sense. And while I appreciate the optimism in that, I just don't see that being what would happen, right?
Right. I think there.
Why would you spend the money for a studio to then like try and reinvent the studio? You spend the money on the studio so that you can keep printing the checks that it's been making this whole time.
The problem with Ubisoft, however, is that their printing machine has kind of gone bust over the past few years. Their games aren't hitting as well as they used to.
It's slowing down.
Which is why I think the Gilmon family might be looking to get rid of it.
Fair enough.
If I was Yves Gilmon, I'd be like, I'm old. I think he's in his late 50s, early 60s at this point. He's been dealing with this for 20 or 30 years. He's made his money. It's time for him to go off and enjoy life somewhere. And if I'm the biggest shareholder of a company and I don't want anything to do with it anymore, of course I'm going to try to sell it for this biggest payout that I have.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, yeah, let us know what you think about this upcoming deal. If you have any idea who might be interested in buying it up, what you would like to see doing with
I vote Devolver Digital buys Ubisoft.
I don't think Devolver Digital, as much as I love them, have that kind of money.
They don't, but that would be great if that somehow worked out.
Chat suggesting maybe Elon Musk will buy them. So what I want more than anything else from Musk, the man who has all the money in the world, is to just buy something up like he did with Twitter and go, yeah, I'm closing it down. Because he could just shut shit down just to get rid of it and not even blink with how much money he has. So I that would be very interesting. He's like, I'm handing all these IP off that you all love to companies that know what they're doing, and we're just going to shut this company down. And he'll write it off as a loss. Ideally,
I don't see that happening.
Like that. There's no way in hell that's going to happen. But if someone were to do it, I could see someone doing it like him as a troll. Just for the
that whole thing's gross. I'm going to move on. In a story from Xputer, in the most timely competition to a video game you've ever imagined, 2K Games is developing a Rocket League competitor called Gravity Goal.
This really does feel like it's
Rocket
about 5
League,
years too
that
late.
Groundbreaking video game from 7 years ago is finally getting in competition. Sources have revealed that 2K Games is working on a new game called Gravity Goal that is aiming to compete against Rocket League. This project, which is currently called Gravity Goal, yes, this is from the type, allows players to drive Tron-like bikes fast rather than cars. And it's legitimately just Rocket League. It's 1v1, 2v2, 3v3. You're scoring by hitting a ball with your vehicle. You're hitting it into a goal. The difference in Gravity Goal, as opposed to Rocket League, is there's discs that you can shoot out of your vehicles to cause damage to your opponents. So, I mean, I guess it's kind of like Rocket League Rumble. Images provided by sources show that these discs look almost like hockey pucks with bright LED lights, which cause the opposing team's vehicle to either stop or slow down once they're hit. Both your own vehicle speed and the opposing team's vehicle speed determine how much damage you cause to the other vehicle. Everything from the arena to the bike shows a Tron-like design with a futuristic and high-energy vibe with bright colors. Take-Two Interactive revealed last year the company plans on releasing around 93 individual games, with 62 planned to release by the end of April 2024. 26 of these games will be free to play, with Gravity Goal looking like it's probably one of them. So if you're really sick of Rocket League and you wait about a year, you can play Rocket League, but with Tron Bikes.
How much you want to bet that the art style to this game will be that fucking Fortnite art style that I just loathe now? Where it's kind of bright, shiny.
It says it's Tron-y, so I think it's going to look kind of like Tron.
Yeah, well, they're saying it's Tron-y because you're on bikes and you're zooming around. I don't think it'll look like Tron. I think it'll look very stylized, cartoony in that Fortnite style that everything seems to be aping now. But instead of being bright greens and reds and like browns like you see in Fortnite, it'll be just nothing but blue and purple. But it's that Fortnite style is like the Cal art style of video games, where it's just everyone is using it now, and I cannot stand it anymore.
It's the default setting on Unreal Engine now?
Yeah, it is the default Unreal Engine setting. Also,
that makes sense, though.
Also, this last bit right here, where it talks about how Take-Two is going to be releasing 93 individual games, of 62 of them planned to release by the end of April 2024, of which 26 of them will be free to play.
Yes.
This does have free to play written all over it, and honestly, I am so tired of free to play as well.
Well, Rocket League went free to play when Epic bought it.
It did, but free to play, like, that was a game that was multiple years in development. You can buy it. It had a full content roster. Today, free to play is now at that level of the lowest common denominator you see in so many Apple Store, like, mobile game purchases, for example. Mm-hmm. Where it's just, it feels borderline shovelware, where they try to crank out a lot of them, hoping to find one that actually hits. It becomes the next Fortnite.
Didn't I review Lost Ark on this show?
I don't know if you actually did or not, but that's definitely in that same category.
Yeah. Some games maybe feel like they're been made for a phone this whole time.
Yeah, 62 games between now and 2 years from now.
And I don't have any issues with people to play a lot of phone games. Let's be real. I mean, that's if that's what you like to do, or if that's what you have access to, get it. Those are just not the games that I want to play on my computer.
No, and most of them just lack. They just lack whatever you can think of. And there's no way a publisher, regardless of how big you are, like, say, Take-Two, is going to crank out 62 games in 2 years and not have the vast majority of those be essentially shovelware bullshit.
Yeah, they can't all be quality. Although, I mean, 2K is a pretty big place at this point, but yeah, it's...
I don't even think most of them are going to be quality.
Probably not.
I'm very, very concerned about hearing those numbers at the end. But either way, we will probably find out more.
I'm actually curious, though, if you went around to the other studios and queued how many games they have in development total, as opposed to just like the big releases or their console releases, but just games, you'll probably see that this number is similar to a lot of other companies. Like, think of how many flipping mobile ports Square Enix has made in the last 2 years.
I see what you're saying.
And, like,
because we might
and all their like free-to-play
right.
Final Fantasy games or free-to-play whatever games.
They say like 62, but of that number, it could be like 5 of them are Grand Theft Auto remasters, and another one could be like a small little dollar store free-to-play thing or something like that. But still, I hear that number, and everyone feels like they're stretching themselves thin as we race down to the bottom of the quality well. And that's what I'm seeing with every major developer now, and I hate it. I absolutely hate it.
That's why I like indie games.
Yeah, I mean, that's been my thing. So far, my favorite game of the year has been Nobody Saves the World. Excellent
choice.
Did you ever get around a chance to play that, by the way?
I started it and then got distracted and then never came back to it.
I highly recommend you get back to it, because that game is... When it comes to gameplay, that game's up there. It just feels fun to play.
It looked cool.
Yeah, highly recommend.
I saw the menu. All right,
let's move on to the next topic here. This is via GameStop. Activision Blizzard loses 60 million monthly active users in the past year. To the article. Activision Blizzard has released its latest quarterly financial report, and the numbers were not good for the publisher, with revenue, player numbers, and Call of Duty unit sales all coming in lower than before. For the quarter ending March 31st, Activision Blizzard had a revenue of $1.77 billion compared to $2.28 billion during the same period last year. Net bookings, meanwhile, amounted to $1.48 billion, down from $2.07 billion last year. In-game net bookings came in at $1.01 billion, a decrease from $1.34 billion. In terms of player numbers, Activision Blizzard's overall monthly active users amounted to 372 million for the quarter. This is down from 435 million during the same period last year. That's a drop of about 63 million players in a year.
Man, that's a lot of numbers to go through. But what it means is that they are just hemorrhaging recurring revenue.
Yes.
Buy Warcraft is what this says to me.
It's beyond Warcraft. It's Call of Duty. It's
it's everything but the recurring portion, right?
Right. Well, don't forget Call of Duty essentially has their Warzone shit now, where people are interacting with that. That's
battle passes and stuff.
That's all part of it. The one part of the company that seems to actually be increasing still is King. I think they did have like an 8% increase. I don't have those numbers handy, but I think they actually went up. So the Activision Blizzard side of things are actually pulling the things down even more than it would seem, because they have to wipe out those gains and then add their own losses on top.
Yep.
Now, for one of those things, chat's saying numbers will continue to drop post-pandemic. That's definitely part of it. I think a lot of people are now going, I don't need to play video games anymore. I can go back outside as we're moving into that phase of reopening everywhere. I think a lot... Go ahead.
I was going to say, that just means I want to play more video games.
Yeah. I think some people might erroneously attribute this to some of the issues going on with the personnel in Activision Blizzard. And while that might have had some to do with it, most people don't even know what the hell's going on. Let's be real.
It's mostly quality.
Mm-hmm. What's happening here is Activision Blizzard hasn't really produced anything like new in a very long time.
The last Call of Duty was disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
Overwatch 2 was Mia. And
yeah, when did Blizzard actually do anything? The last thing that I can think of that Blizzard rolled out was the last World of Warcraft expansion, which is now going on a year plus old now.
Yeah.
Like the studio the studio of the studios of the studio of Blizzard has been very, very laden with a drought right now when it comes to content. And people just start piecing out. They're like, I've played this, I'm out. Call of Duty Vanguard kind of sucked, I'm out. I have Apex. I have Fortnite. I have, I was going to say whatever EA currently has.
It's not Battlefield, that's for sure. Maybe it's Battlefield 4.
Yeah, Battlefield 5. Going back. Are they on Battlefield 5 or 6? I've actually forgotten, because that's how irrelevant that game series has become to me now.
They're on 2042, but I think everyone's gone back to play Battlefield 4, last I checked.
I was trying to think of the weather one, and it wasn't clicking, because that's how little I care about that franchise now.
Oof.
But yeah, it's a combination of all that, between a lackluster year last year, because remember, nothing came out last year. I'm using that term spuriously, but for the most part, not much came out last year. Now everything's opening back up. People like, I've played video games for the past year and a half. I'm going outside. It's the same reason why you're seeing subscription services drop in subscribers as well. Like Netflix just had a massive drop off on users for like the first time ever in its history, and it caused their stock to tank like 30 or 40%. So you're seeing people unplugging, and these numbers are going to get worse before they get better, for sure. David, is there anything you want to add to this here? It's really hard to feel sympathy for Activision Blizzard, right? If they were like trying, you can kind of go, that sucks, they tried and they still fucked up. But this has just been like, I can't even point to anything positive they've had in at least a year.
Yeah, it's just the quality hasn't been there for a long time.
Yeah. Take us to the next story here, David. Speaking of quality, I guess, at least something that people like.
I'm like, that's the kind of segue. In a story from Video Games Chronicle, Sonic 2 is now the highest grossing video game movie of all time in the United States. In its third week in U.S. cinemas, the movie held firm at second place in the box office charts, grossing a further $15.6 million on top of its existing earnings. That's right, we're talking about movies here, not video games, so the numbers start with an M instead of a B. According to Box Office Mojo, this means the movie has now grossed a total of $146,258,543 in the United States. I don't know how they can get down to the $43 part, but what are you going to do? As noted by Sonic news site Tails Channel, the extra $15.6 million takes Sonic 2 above the total U.S. box office of Pokemon Detective Pikachu, Uncharted, and the original Sonic movie, making it the highest-grossing video game movie ever in the U.S. box office. That being said, did anyone see Uncharted?
Uncharted did really well.
I don't know a single person in real life that saw that film.
Neither did I, but Uncharted did surprisingly well when it came
I mean, it really was just cast Tom Holland and Marky Mark in a movie, and people will show up. Apparently, that's all anybody needs.
That is one of those movies that I think people shut up for, not knowing that Uncharted was a video game. They just saw an action flick with 2 hot stars in it.
Hot? Marky Mark?
Yeah, he's not attractive, but like
I don't mean, I know what you meant. I was like, did he retire back into relevancy?
I don't think Marky Mark ever left relevancy. I know that it's been somewhat downhill since his days as the frontman of a rap group in the early 90s. I mean, he left the Funky Bunch and his career never really took off.
I mean, I guess we can make fun of Marky Mark for a while, but I'm going to move on. It's important to note, as I mentioned at the top, that this only relates to the domestic U.S. box office, and the film still has some ways to go before it can be considered the highest-grossing video game movie worldwide, because there's some crushers. Box Office Mojo states that Sonic 2's total worldwide gross stands at $288 million, which makes it just 10th on the highest-grossing video game movies worldwide, behind the likes of the original Sonic, the Angry Birds movie, Uncharted, Detective Pikachu, and the #1 video game film, Warcraft. Yes, that Warcraft.
Did not do well.
439 million made worldwide because that movie crushed in China.
Yes.
And overseas. Not as good in the U.S., but yeah, international markets flipping loved Warcraft.
Yeah, I'm still kind of surprised with how well that movie did and how we haven't really heard of any word on a sequel to that.
Yeah, and the CG I think still looked pretty good.
Never saw it. Well, I take that back. I saw it for like 30 minutes and just went, this isn't for me, and stopped.
I don't know anything about Warcraft, so, I'll watch anything if it's on TV.
I'm kind of glad to see Sonic 2 doing well. I have never been a Sonic fan, but I've never held it in disdain like some people do. I think a lot of that's because I'm terrified of the Sonic the Hedgehog Twitter account, because if that person sees you passionate, they come after you hard. But there was something about this movie that I felt I would appreciate when people saw the original rollout of what Sonic looked like, and they went, what the fuck is that? And they went, okay, we get it. We'll give you what you want. And they went back and gave us what the people wanted. And I was like, that shows that they're at least listening to the fans. I am more willing to give the benefit of the doubt to a studio or company or person, whatever, that is willing to receive feedback, even negative, and go, okay, yeah, I get it. We need to change this. Because just so rarely see that happen. So congrats to the makers of Sonic the Hedgehog. Congrats to the fans of Sonic the Hedgehog. It sounds like you actually have a pretty decent franchise going on here.
And shout out Jean-Ralphio from Parks and Rec.
Is he like the main guy in it?
Ben Schwartz is the voice of Sonic in the Sonic films.
Oh, okay. So I've never seen. I haven't. Go ahead.
And that guy is flipping hilarious.
I've never seen Parks and Rec beyond the parts of Ron Swanson in it, and I have not seen Sonic the Hedgehog's movies, either one of them.
Well, dang. I can't help you then.
I would be very curious to know if they actually get a third one out of this, because Jim Carrey is notorious for not wanting to do sequels ever. It was considered somewhat of an act of God to have him even show up for a second one, because he just hates sequels. So I'll be very...
I think he is legitimately having fun.
He might be. I don't know. This is the first time I've seen Jim Carrey actually be like classic Jim Carrey in a long time, though.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what's going on. He's just like enjoying himself, so he came back. But we will see.
David, I have this here story from Game Developer that I want to get what your vibe from this is before I talk about why I wanted to bring it up.
Okay.
Headline: Timed game trials are now a requirement for some PlayStation developers. to
Do
the
you want
story.
instant feedback, or do you want to start the story?
Let me read the story, then I want your feedback.
Okay.
Sony has begun communicating with developers about its plan for timed game trials for the PlayStation Plus premium subscribers. According to sources speaking to game developers working on games that have a wholesale cost of $34 or higher are now required to create time-limited game trials of their games. These trials versions must be at least 2 hours long. Games that cost lower than those amounts are not required to create limited time trials according to the new policy. The plan follows Sony's announcement for the expanded subscription options for PlayStation Plus. Many developers were informed about the new policy via an update to Sony's developer portal. Our sources indicated they had not received any other communication about this charge. The good news is, these requirements are not retroactive and do not apply to upcoming PlayStation VR titles. The less great news is that if you're a developer planning to release on the PlayStation Store in the future, you now need to budget time and resources to create these new timed trials. There is some flexibility as part of the Sony's policy. Developers have up until 3 months after their game launches on the PlayStation Store to release their limited time trial. Trials are only required to be available to PlayStation Plus premium users for at least 12 months. Sony is also open to releasing custom game demos instead of time-limited game trials, but these will only be approved on a case-by-case basis. Developers are also still free to publish free weekends, game trials, or custom demos that can be accessed by all PlayStation owners. So what is your... I want to see if you caught what I caught in all this and if you came to the same conclusion.
This worked out great for the Ouya. Do you remember the Ouya, Steven?
Oh, only when I read the story.
Do you remember when they announced that every game released on Ouya was required to have a demo attached so that you could log into their storefront and try any game you see? And then it turns out when you're marketing to people specifically not making AAA games and they have to do extra work just to get their thing to work on your platform, you know what they don't do? They don't do the extra work to go on your platform. Not when B-tier developers can just make their game and then have it on Xbox, which will also put it on PC, and not have to make anything extra. It'll just be there.
That is exactly what I thought of when I read this, because Sony is already...
This will be repealed. I know it's late for a prediction. I'm going to give it... I'm trying to be aggressive. I'm going to go with less than a year.
Yeah, and this will just get dropped off, and they hope no one pays attention to it.
Yep.
Sony is already very quickly developing a reputation amongst smaller developers about just not giving a fuck about indie people or even B-tier teams.
Yeah.
Given the fact that they just unceremoniously canceled Vita while people just ordered Vita development kits and with no way to, like, shit like that.
Mm-hmm. Sony just doesn't care.
No.
Sony has their in-house studios to make big AAA games that are only available on PlayStation for a limited time. And Jim Ryan's an idiot. So what are you going to get?
Absolutely. The indie scene in game development is I don't want to say the term easier, but it's becoming more accessible to smaller and smaller and smaller teams. Where you can have a team of a single person like Lucas Pope, the guy who does Papers, Please and Return of the Obra Dinn, or the guy who made Axiom Verge, whose name escapes me right now.
And Axiom Verge 2.
And Axiom Verge 2. Or very small teams like the people who made Disco Elysium. And it's at the point where for Sony, for Naughty Dog, making a 2-hour time demo, whatever, who cares? For a team of 5 people, that's another couple of months of work for no extra payout.
They are attempting to get around this by making it so the bottom dollar amount is $34 or higher for your video game. So there's another way that this is where every single game that we see that's an indie game released on the PlayStation platform is now $33.99 instead of $34.99.
Yeah, you just take. Is it worth? But that's still a shitty place to put someone. Is it worth it as a developer to take, say, a $5 hit per game to make it $29.99, cutting out roughly a seventh of your revenue? Or is it worth your time to spend that extra few months to build a 2-hour demo? And God forbid if your game's only 2 or 3 hours to begin with.
Or you just release it on Xbox.
Yeah, you say, fuck it, how much does Game Pass want for it?
Yep.
How much to get put on Game Pass? How much am I going to make just putting on Steam where I have the chance of having it refunded in the first 2 hours? Which, by the way, I think would be a better solution than Sony doing this shit. But if Sony will let people refund their game after a couple of hours, then that means that Sony loses revenue because they would have to pay them back. Yep. This is a way to do what Steam does with its couple of hour guarantee, where essentially on Steam, for those who don't know, any game you buy on Steam, if you choose that you don't want to play it, you can typically get a refund within the first 2 hours.
There's some additional caveats, but yeah.
Yeah, but that means there's no like demos or anything like that, because the buying of the game, it kind of counts as a demo. And as a developer, you don't have to do any extra work to have this separate playable thing that someone can test out on there.
Yep.
Sony could do something like that very easily. But that also means Sony has to constantly pay back out any cash they have coming in as well.
Mm-hmm.
This is a way for them to pass that cost on indie developers, again, in a ecosystem that is becoming increasingly hostile to anyone developing on it that isn't a major developer.
It's just more classic Sony being Sony. What are you gonna do? Besides make fun of it, because that's what we usually do.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna mock it, because at this point, Sony is going to be dragged along with Xbox into actually putting their shit out on PC. It's already starting to happen. You might have them timed 6 months or so, but the second that happens, I probably will never turn my console on again. And it's going to be Sony's fault. Because the only thing that Sony has right now, Sony used to be a place where I played a lot of indie stuff, because some indie games I like playing on just a controller, and I like just having them there, right? As Sony becomes more and more hostile to anyone that is not Sony, people are going to stop making things for Sony, which means that console serves for me what the Xbox served me as, an exclusive machine, where I will play only the exclusives on there. Then Microsoft went, you know what? We own Windows. What the fuck do we care? PC is essentially our platform too. Put all of our games on PC. So I went, cool, and then stopped playing the Xbox.
Also, the biggest killer to indie games on the major consoles, to me, the existence of the Steam Deck.
See, I don't have that, but that is.
I don't have one yet either, but I'm definitely going to get one, because once I have one, I will probably never turn on the Nintendo Switch ever again unless they make a Mario Odyssey 2. I also probably just will play all indies there, or I can have it plugged into my TV and just pair a controller with it.
This is why I can tell you I'll still end up playing my Switch even with stuff on that's on multi-platform. It's because when I started this conversation, I didn't even think about Nintendo. Nintendo just exists in its own
right. It's their own thing. They're basically untouchable.
Yeah, and I've bitched about that in the past, and I still fall victim to it as well. But I didn't even consider the Switch when I was reading this story about indies. It just is. People go, oh yeah, that's the Switch. He does his own thing, and we just leave him alone. But yeah, you came to the exact same place that I did with this, and I was curious.
The flippin' fact that we both went to the Ouya is especially funny to me, because who the hell thinks about the Ouya for any reason?
To us when it's convenient.
Oh boy. Boy.
All right, let's move to the actually I think this is all
right, in a story from gamesindustry.biz, Gamefreak, the Pokemon people, announces an optional 4-day work week. Don't get too excited. Today, Pokemon maker Gamefreak announced it's introduced an optional 4-day work week. According to the official press release, as translated by Google, the shift is intended for full-time staffers with young children and families. Employees that opt into the system will receive 80% of their standard salary compared to their counterparts that work 5 days, which is attributed to them working 1 day less. The 4-day work week will operate on a monthly basis from the first of the month to the last of the month. And that's the story. They're giving you the ability to work part-time. Congratulations, Game Freak. You've invented part-time work. You work less and get paid less.
First of all, we don't know if they're technically fall into the part-time category. They could probably still have all their benefits. I didn't see anything about them taking benefits or anything like that away. I actually do agree with this stance. Now, when I did read this headline, I also thought it was like the 4-day work week, maybe 4 10-hour shifts. and then you have like 3 days off. And then part of me went, okay, maybe there's 4 days normal hours because a bunch of companies are doing the 4 days, 8 hours a day, and you're still getting paid your full.
That's the thing, is there's several companies that are not Game Freak that are doing 4-day work weeks where you just still get paid. And you just work 4 days now.
But I also have no problem with the company offering, hey, if you want to have 4 days on, 3 days off, we'll pay you for those 4 days.
Congratulations. If you want to come in part-time, you can be part-time.
More options is never bad. However,
I get that, but
this all does tie into the topic we've been going off about a couple months now at this point, that is very competitive for talent at this point in time. Which is why you're seeing a lot of these companies do things like this. They're going to full-time remote work to, like you said, the 4 days full pay, full salary, what they were making with 3 days off. This is another move in that direction. Game Freak, I believe, is based in Japan. I think that they do have kind of a different view on it here. And as far as the Japanese culture goes, this is a little bit more of a liberal setting. I could be dead wrong on that, but that's just what my gut tells me.
Well, there you go. If you're looking for part-time work, check out Game Freak.
I have to make clear, we don't know if they're actually counted as part-time or not. Like, for example, in America, 4-day work week is 32 hours. If you're working full days, that's not part-time. That's full-time in most states in America.
I'm just making the joke, man.
Yeah, fair enough. I get that you're making a joke. I just want to tamp down the people who might be coming in with your wrongs or something like that. And I could
they could be wrong, mad at me all they want. I just talked about at the beginning of the show. I won't be here as much. It's just got to go to your email, bro. I don't give a shit.
As an aside, by the way, I think the last time you were on here, we talked about Saudi Arabia in depth.
Yeah. Did people get mad at me? I'm sure they did.
Both of us. That right there pulled in more hate than our typical Star Citizen rants.
Oh, you know what's funny is at the top of the show, I was actually going to announce, instead of the way we did it, my plan was to say, everybody, I'm sorry, I don't have the time. I'm going to retire from the show, but I promise I will be back the day Star Citizen is released.
Hilarious.
But then I felt that was too mean, and that means that you're not going to see me for like another 8 years.
Or if ever.
If ever.
I just find it funny that certain topics, you could tell like there are people who just scan for keywords just to get mad. And apparently Saudi Arabia, being an oppressive fuckhole country that uses slave labor and like executes people on a nonstop basis, is a terrible place, and people get really upset at that. And it sucks that they own SNK now.
Man, I had to bring it back to SNK.
Yeah, well, we had to tie it to game somehow. David,
while you're cutting, make sure you get David.
next story here, via Video Game Chronicle, and much like the previous story, this sounds good at first, but the more I think about it, the less happy I actually am for this. Headline: PlayStation has set up a new game preservation team. To the article itself. PlayStation has set up a new game preservation team, according to new employee. Garrett Fredley, who previously been working on build engineer for Canadian mobile developer Kablam, has joined PlayStation as a senior build engineer. Celebrating his new employment, Friedley posted a message on Twitter and LinkedIn pages expressing his excitement at joining the new preservation team. He said the following: "Today is my first day as senior build engineer for PlayStation, working as one of the initial hires for the new created preservation team. Game preservation was my first career passion. It's my first foray into the world of software engineering and DevOps, into a world that so many are unaware of. I was just a novice back then, contributing in any way I could regardless of my inexperience. Now I'm back to it. No longer the novice I once was. Thank you, Global Head of QA Mike Bishop, and the team for bringing me on the board for this adventure. Let's go ensure our industry's history isn't forgotten." It's not clear what this new role will entail, or exactly what this new game preservation team's aims will be. So, we have gone on at great length about how we think that game preservation is extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that really needs to be addressed in the industry. Besides, like, the really serious adult issues, this is the other thing. that needs some attention.
Right. If you want to go from like a pure fan standpoint, this is probably my biggest issue in the games industry right now is the lack of just preservation in general.
Especially compared to, well, music's a tough one since there was the day the music died. But like films and some other things, they do a lot more work of making it so that we have access to films from like 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not really any legacy access to a lot of video games. And hell, we're even talking about PlayStation right now. Can anyone tell me, besides streaming it at a bad resolution, poor frame rates, and with input lag, how can I play Metal Gear Solid 4 besides dragging out my PS3, which, oh, that's right, has a yellow light of death and stopped working like 9 years ago?
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's just it's a frustrating topic, and I'm really hopeful. Like you mentioned, this sounds on paper awesome. PlayStation has a game preservation team. That sounds perfect. That's something that I've been complaining about. That's something that we've talked about before, that Jim Ryan seemed very tone deaf on when he said who would play old video games. And maybe this is them trying to correct that ship, but just it's so hard to trust Sony on this. If this was someone being hired by Microsoft for the new game preservation team, I probably wouldn't even bat an eye at it because of how much work they've done for backwards compatibility. I would just think, okay, cool. They're just doing more work on that thing. This could be Sony's foray into that space, but it's really tough for me to be like, I guess, optimistic about it. So enough I'm off base on that one.
You mentioned Jim Ryan, and I'm glad you brought up Microsoft. To compare and contrast here, today Bethesda released all the old Elder Scrolls on Steam for free.
Yep.
Arena, Daggerfall, I think Wolfenstein Enemy Territory even. They just went, here, have these for free. I went, holy shit, thank you. Do you see Jim Ryan doing anything like that?
Hell no. Not ever. Not for any video game that they've ever released. He wouldn't even know why it would be cool to do something like that. Mm-hmm. He would just look at it and say, oh, no one's going to do that. We're not going to spend the resources to click that checkbox.
So when I hear many other places say game preservation team, I'm like, awesome. They're going to store this in a way that future generations can access it. Maybe update it for modern machines. For example, System Shock 2 was notoriously had a hard time running on newer stuff until the modding community came around and fixed it. But when I hear Sony's game preservation team, you know what my brain translates that into? Sony's emulation team, so we can repackage and resell this shit to you.
Yeah, that kind of feels like it would be. So, one of the main reasons why I'm so critical about Sony specifically is that their consoles have exclusively existed post the CD-ROM. Every single PlayStation game that you could ever buy from the beginning of time to now is available on a disc. And discs are not immortal.
No,
they're not a perfectly preserved piece of media.
If anything, they actually degrade faster than the old cartridges do.
100% they degrade faster than the old cartridges do. And there's going to come a time where people are going to try and plug in their old PlayStation games because there's no good way to play it anymore besides on an original PlayStation plugged into an old TV. And the disc just won't work. And that date isn't impossibly far away. It may seem like it to some people, but I don't know. This is something that they need to be working on like right the fuck now. So I'm really excited that they could potentially be paying attention to it. But like I said, I'm half full at best on this one.
Everything about this to me screams it's less about game preservation and more making sure that it runs on emulation, which, hey, at least you will have access to it.
In a fashion.
It is radically different than game preservation, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I think it's just a way to kind of cash in on an industry buzzword that does have some attention. It is getting rightly more and more attention every year.
Now, that being said, Garrett Fredley seems like someone who is actually pretty passionate about it.
Yeah.
So, and if he's brought on a high level, which a senior engineer thinks like you would be a decently high level, maybe this means that they are doing the work that we need them to do. Right. I need to hear more. I want to see where this goes.
And to be 100% clear, Garrett Friendly, this is not a knock against him. I hope this
Hell no.
goes
This
the way
guy
he wants
sounds
to.
awesome.
He seems into it. This is me not trusting Sony with their words.
And by extension, Jim Ryan, who's, heading the ship at the moment.
Right. Dave, why don't you go ahead and lead us off the last story of the night here?
I will do that. In a story from GamesIndustry.biz, they were very popular on tonight's episode. Gearbox to acquire Tiny Tina co-developer Lost Boys Interactive. Great name for a studio, by the way. They are set to fully acquire Lost Boys Interactive for an undisclosed sum. The independent studio was formed in 2017 and has worked on both co-development projects and its own IP for PCs and consoles. In addition to contributing to the development of Call of Duty and PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, Lost Boys has already worked with Gearbox on last month's Borderlands spin-off Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. The studio will become a subsidiary of Gearbox, operating independently while working with other Gearbox teams on the development of future games. Lost Boys currently stands at 220 staff, which is way more than I thought, bringing Gearbox's global workforce to around 1,300, with plans to grow to 350 by 2024. Steven, video game studios are becoming huge.
Yeah.
Lost Boys is something that I would consider a small studio, and they've got 220 people.
Yeah, that was shocking to me, too, when I read that.
Right? Like, I don't see Lost Boys and think, like 220 used to be that's a big development team. There's a point in time where that was Naughty Dog. So that's kind of crazy.
Games are getting bigger. So as easy, in contrast to what I said at the beginning of the show about how game development is becoming more and more accessible to smaller and smaller teams, your big budget shit is spiraling out of control with how big of a
it's
team
like
they have to have.
It's a feature creep plus everything else creep, and while the technology to get into making games is easier, when you're trying to really polish things and fine tune it, and
when
especially
if you're
making
the next
big
Last
video
of
games,
Us, or you're trying to make
you
the
can
next
run
Fortnite.
into so many. It's easy to make something simple that feels polished, but when you start getting complicated and you start adding more and more depth, sometimes it'll start bursting at the seams, and you got to figure out how to put it back together.
And so many games chasing that Fortnite dollar are no longer just, here is a game. It is packaged. The stuff like The Last of Us is unique now. The stuff like that has reoccurring seasons now is the new flavor of the month. So you can't just make a game and be done with it, and then you have your people move on to something else. You have to make the game, and then you have to keep supporting it with a nonstop steady stream of content. Halo announced that they're doing like six-month seasons, I think. That's going to kill that game. But 6 months is way too long to release new content.
Yeah.
It needs to be, at the very least, quarterly, if not weekly at this point, as everyone is fighting for their time.
I think like a 20-day thing is what they have in like Call of Duty and stuff like that, or a 14-day thing is what they have in some other games.
So what's happening as a result of that is you don't just make a game and then move your people onto the next thing. You have to
have staff,
keep supporting that game while making the next thing, meaning your staff is going to get bloated.
Especially as you have multiple projects that are all out and operating at the same time.
And let's not forget, this is Gearbox buying Lost Boys. But Gearbox isn't independent anymore either. They're owned by Embracer Group.
Yep.
And all of this is under that massive umbrella.
Everyone's getting eaten by everyone.
This rate of growth, not on the game side, not in the making game side, but in the staffing side of things, is unsustainable. And I worry that in a couple of years, we were a few years ago, maybe not even a few years ago, maybe even only a year ago, we were talking about nonstop layoffs, it seemed. Every new week, a new studio was getting shut down. People were getting laid off.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is going to pale in comparison to what we're going to see 2 or 3 years from now when the live service trend busts.
Yeah, it's just some weird cycle.
David?
Yes.
It's going to be at least 2 years, I think, before we see the results of that. And given the fact that I can't keep my mind away from anything new for even a week, I need a steady stream of content to keep me occupied. I am the problem that I just talked about. about how I need.
You're the reason all these
it's
developers
me
are struggling.
specifically.
Yep.
My rate of consumption is higher than any one person should be, so I need a steady diet of new games coming in to keep me from becoming bored and thinking about where my waste of a life has gone. So,
well, lucky you, because this week,
you got
honestly, man, I think you might be in luck, and I think you might be in luck a couple of times.
Yeah.
First up, something that I know for a fact we are both excited about, even though I don't think either of us are buying it this week. Dune Spice Wars hits early access on PC this week. This is a 4X real-time strategy game, and if you've never watched this show, we're fans. From the developers of the critically acclaimed Northgard, set in Frank Herbert's groundbreaking Dune universe, you must lead your faction in battle for control and dominance over the harsh desert planet of Arrakis. Spice must flow, baby. Check it out.
So I did not know this was made by the people who made Northgard. I am way more excited for this now. I was kind of like not as excited for it because Funcom was behind it.
Dude,
and I don't really care for
we talked about this at like the VGAs, and we're fucking excited about
it. I can't be half-assed to remember something like that.
Yeah, that was like 6 months ago. Shit, you're right. You'll never know. Well, I know you don't like games that are in early access, Steven. So how about instead of playing Dune right this second, you wait just a little while, and I know that might be tough for you, but hear me out. You could play Galactic Civilizations 4.
Which
is also out this week. Please keep in mind that Galactic Civ 4 is on Epic. It's got that Epic stamp on it for this initial release. This is a 4X strategy game set in the 24th century, where humans have discovered faster and light travel, and aliens complete with humanity for the domination of the galaxy. The Galactic Civ games are very fun. I like them quite a bit, and this one's probably going to be great. If you don't know what it is, you should Google it.
Too bad.
Because Galactic Civ is great, and the more 4X games, the better. Also out this week, Kaiju Wars hits PC, which looks pretty fun, actually. Play out a kaiju movie as the hopelessly outclassed military in the stylish 2D turn-based strategy game. Construct buildings and defend your city with cannon fodder, tanks, jets, and more as the devastating kaiju grow in power with every attack. This looks like a very colorful, stylized version of Into the Breach, but maybe not as roguelike-y. It's just more of a 2D turn-based strategy, but with the way the monsters are designed and the tanks and the military stuff, I got Breach vibes.
Yeah, it definitely has that vibe to it. I'll be playing this tomorrow, a day early before it comes out, so thank you very much to the VR team for sending me the advanced code. I am looking forward to getting a hold of it. I've been sitting on this for almost a month now, but I have yet to play it because I wanted my first time on stream, my first experience to be what everyone else's first experience with it is.
Nice. So what's funny, Steven, is if you don't like any of the recommendations that I've made thus far on the show, the next one, if you've never played it, is honestly a must-buy, in my opinion. The Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe hits all the PlayStations and the Xboxes and PC this week. Honestly, Stanley Parable is the best, the less you know about it.
Yeah,
it is a video game where you play as a character named Stanley. There is a narrator, and that's all I'll give you. But I promise you it's great. It's
in that
funny,
same level
it's
of
witty, it's good. It's a good-ass video game, and they remastered it. This game is, I think, 7 years old now. It's been out for a while, and if you've never heard of it or it's not on your radar, Stanley Parable, play it. It's great.
It's in that same level of mindfuckery like the Hex or Undertale.
Yeah.
Where it really fucks with your expectations.
It is a video game that's aware of what it is, but you're not, because it's kind of subverting what you expect from playing a, I don't know, first-person adventure game? Let's call it that.
Let's call it that.
There we go. Next on the list, maybe you won't be as excited. Vampire the Masquerade Blood Hunt hits PlayStation and PC this week. This is a free-to-play third-person battle royale set in the vampire universe. And
this has flop written all over it.
And considering they only managed to make like one good video game out of that entire intellectual property over the last decade and a half, I'm not hopeful.
All right.
Maybe one day we'll get a good video game set in the World of Darkness universe, but I don't think today's that day.
I've got two major issues with it. One, just the game itself. It looks like this is one of those things that feels like it's being sent out to die. There's absolutely no buzz on this. This feels like Battleborn Part 2. Like, this is going to come out and just immediately flop. Even though I think it's come out in early access, to be in its defense. 2, my other issue with it is from a purely nerd narrative standpoint. I was a big fan of this World of Darkness setting way back when it was first like big in the late 90s. I was more of a werewolf guy, but vampire was always tangential to it. And as a fan of that setting, there's no way in hell this shit would be allowed in any city.
Right.
The prince of that city would lock that down so hard and just execute anyone fighting like that. Because the big thing about the whole idea, it's called the Masquerade for a reason. You're supposed to keep that shit hidden.
This video game spits in the face of the fucking IP it is using to sell said video game.
Yes.
So if you are a fan of the source material that they are trying to use to pitch you this video game, they already fucked up.
Any prince of a city where people were fighting like this openly in it, he himself or she herself would have their asses on the chopping block for letting it get to that point to begin with.
Unfortunately, Steven, we are far too nerdy to be the target audience.
Oh,
for
I
Vampire
fully
the
admit
Masquerade Blood Hunt.
This is like that scene when it's like, there's actually 56 episodes of Doctor Who because the Pirates of Ice Planet Zero is a 2-parter and that's only one episode. It's that level of bullshit.
There's not too many things that you and I will both do this, but if you're gonna fuck with World of Darkness or you're gonna fuck with BattleTech, you're catching these hands.
Yeah.
Verbally
that's
on the internet.
That's definitely it.
From the safety of our respective homes.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. All right. Also out of early access this week, Rogue Legacy 2 is on the Xboxes and PC. It's what you'd get if you'd mashed Rogue Legacy together with a sequel. That's from their own press release. I read it the first time it came out, and I think it still perfectly describes this video game.
I couldn't remember where we got that from. Was it this game when it just first came out?
Yeah. It was the very first copy of Rogue Legacy 2. It's what you get when you mash Rogue Legacy together with a sequel, and I just thought that was the funniest shit of all time. So, yeah. It's a... Fuck, just play it. Rogue Legacy's good. Everybody likes that game, right? You've played it, right?
I've never played it. Never played either one of them.
Okay. Well, when you're not busy with, let's see, like 9 4X games, and then there's some other stuff coming out soon. Yeah, and you'll get to it. You'll get to it maybe in October.
I mean, I've got Trek to Yomi coming out next week, I think. I've got the Stellaris expansion coming out in a couple weeks. This shit's stacked for me specifically.
I'm giving you October. Also out this week, Nintendo Switch Sports comes out on Switch. It's remember Wii Sports?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You know what the Nintendo Switch is?
Yeah, it's the thing I keep calling the Wii.
Yeah, okay. Now take your hands and put them together. That's Nintendo Switch Sports. You got it. You figured it out.
I'm actually surprised this was not a launch title for the Switch.
This should have come out 3 years ago.
No.
That being said, have fun. My Switch will continue to collect dust. The House of the Dead remake is the last game on my list this week. That's coming out on PC. A remade version of the game from 1997. They came out in arcades and blew young me away, honestly.
Based on the hit movie from Uwe Boll.
Oh, man. Why you got to do an entire franchise dirty like that?
I kind of want to play this.
Right? House of the Dead was a great video game. My only issue is that I wish that this was instead a remake of the far better spinoff, The Typing of the Dead.
It's funny
which
that you
in
say
itself
that.
was a remake of The House of the Dead, except for it was a typing helper instead of a light rail shooter.
I think I would prefer them rather than give me House of the Dead remake, which I'd have an interest in. But give me another House of the Dead overkill, the Grindhouse House of the Dead, which really just leaned into what it was.
Yep. These games, if you've never played a House of the Dead, it's basically like an 80s horror movie come to life in a video game, including just the worst acting you've ever heard. And it's so bad it's good. You know, it's cheesy, it's funny, it's House of the Dead.
Yeah, and it's a light gun game. I'm kind of curious if they probably just use the cursor, I'd imagine, on the PC, unless you have a VR headset. I don't know. Is it VR compatible? I
don't know. I'm assuming you just play with mouse and keyboard. Although I guess it's just mouse, right? It's a light gun game.
Yeah, unless they got the Typing of the Dead add-on.
Right? Maybe. Wait for that expansion pack.
David, that does it for new releases, which that does it for the show itself. This has been GamePoints episode 307, and man, thank you for joining the show again. I know that your appearances are going to be off and on, but your presence has truly been missed.
Woo.
Regardless if he's here or not, however, we will be streaming again next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, right here at twitch.tv/GamePoints. And if you enjoy what you saw and you want to support the stream, you know what to do when it comes to your support. Follows the notifications turned on, likes, bits, subs. There's a Discord you can join. The link is provided down below. There's various Twitters you can follow. You can follow the show at GamePoints PC, myself, Stephen Brown, at CapitalistPig21, and David there at Palshlife_Satori. We do stream out throughout the week as well. I stream Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Tomorrow, of course, being an early look at Kaiju Wars, as we mentioned earlier. Once again, thank you all for showing up. Until next time, we're out of here.